Hey there, fellow humans. Tonight, we're diving into the murky waters of wealth inequality. It's a system where the rich get richer, and everyone else is left wondering where all the money went. Think of it as the world's biggest heist, happening right under our noses. This isn't about hard work or innovation. It's about exploiting loopholes and manipulating the system to funnel wealth upwards. We're talking about hedge funds, private equity firms, and a little something called carried interest. Don't worry if you haven't heard of it. Most people haven't. That's kind of the point. This is about how a select few are playing by a different set of rules. Rules that allow them to pay lower taxes than their secretaries while contributing to a system that's leaving millions behind. It's time to shine a light on this rigged game and ask ourselves, is this really the kind of society we want? Believe it or not, the story of carried interest starts centuries ago with pirates. Yeah, you heard that right. Back in the 16th century, ship captains would get a cut of the treasure called carried interest for, not losing the ship and stuff. Fast forward a few centuries and this maritime tradition somehow found its way into the world of high finance. Now, instead of eye patches and parrots, we have guys in expensive suits and even more expensive haircuts, but the principle is the same. They get a big chunk of the profits, even if they didn't put up much of the initial investment. The difference is these modern-day privateers aren't plundering Spanish galleons. They're buying up companies, loading them with debt, and then squeezing every last penny out of them, often at the expense of workers and the economy as a whole. Let's talk about Blackstone, one of the biggest private equity firms in the world. These guys are masters of the universe, managing trillions of dollars in assets. They own everything from shopping malls to hospitals to dating apps. Seriously, they probably own the chair you're sitting on right now. Blackstone's success is built on the backs of carried interest. Their executives rake in billions by taking a hefty percentage of the profits from their investments, all while paying a lower tax rate than most working-class Americans. This isn't just about one company, though. Blackstone is the poster child for a whole industry that's grown fat off of this loophole. An industry that's more interested in making a quick buck than investing in long-term growth, or, God forbid, paying their fair share of taxes. Here's how the carried interest loophole works. Imagine you and your buddies pool your money to buy a house. You fix it up, flip it, and make a profit. That profit is taxed as capital gains, which is usually lower than the income tax rate. Makes sense, right? Now, imagine that one of your buddies is a private equity hotshot. Instead of using his own money, he uses your pooled cash to buy up a bunch of houses, fixes them up, and sells them at a massive profit. Guess what? His cut of the profit is still taxed as capital gains, even though he barely put up any of the initial investment. That, my friends, is carried interest in a nutshell. It's a legal loophole that allows private equity managers and hedge fund billionaires to pay a lower tax rate on their earnings than teachers, firefighters, and pretty much everyone else who actually works for a living. Section 5. The price we all pay, societal and economic impacts. This isn't just about numbers on a tax form. The carried interest loophole has real-world consequences for all of us. When the ultra-wealthy avoid paying their fair share, it starves the government of resources needed for essential services like education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Think about it. Our schools are crumbling, our bridges are falling apart, and people are going bankrupt over medical bills. Meanwhile, hedge fund managers are launching themselves into space and buying up luxury yachts like they're going out of style. Something is seriously wrong with this picture. The private equity industry also has a nasty habit of loading companies up with debt, cutting jobs, and gutting pensions. They call it unlocking value. We call it greed. And it's the working class that ends up paying the price. Section 6. Hollow victories. Political attempts at reform. Now, you might be thinking, surely our elected officials wouldn't stand for this blatant injustice. Well, you'd be right to think that, but sadly wrong. There have been attempts to close the carried interest loophole, but they've been about as effective as a screen door on a submarine. Politicians on both sides of the aisle talk a big game about tackling inequality, but when push comes to shove, they often cave to the demands of wealthy donors and powerful lobbyists. It's enough to make you want to scream into the void. Section 7. The lobbying machine. Money talks, laws bend. The private equity industry spends millions of dollars every year lobbying politicians to protect their precious tax breaks. They wine and dine them, shower them with campaign contributions, and whisper sweet nothings about job creators and economic growth in their ears. And guess what? It works. The influence of money in politics is a cancer on our democracy, and it's allowing the wealthy and powerful to rig the system in their favor. It's time to kick the lobbyists out of Washington and start putting the interests of the American people first. Section 8. A system rigged. Questions of fairness and accountability. So where does that leave us? We have a financial system that's rigged in favor of the wealthy and powerful, a political system that's beholden to special interests, and an economy that's leaving millions of people behind. It's enough to make you want to give up and go live in a yurt in the woods. But here's the thing. We don't have to accept this. We can demand better. We can demand a system that's fair, just, and works for everyone, not just the privileged few. We can demand that our elected officials represent the people, not the corporations and billionaires who fund their campaigns. Section 9. Conclusion. Time for a change. The carried interest loophole is just one example of how the system is rigged against the working class. It's time to close this loophole, end the undue influence of money in politics, and create an economy that works for everyone. We can't afford to wait any longer. The future of our country is at stake and seen.